Recording in progress. So, David, so nice to meet you. I'm so happy. Believe me, it's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you, Lala. It's a pleasure to meet you and to
Thank
be on your
you.
program.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually for the Armenian newspaper here in Buenos Aires, but we'll start with you. So this is a big honor because we'll start with a big figure in our community with these YouTube programs about interviewing important people. Let's be honest. So you're in Colorado. Is that where you live?
Boulder, Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains.
All right. Yeah. Actually, I gotta say I've checked it. I googled it, and it's a lovely place.
It is.
It is
Yes.
good.
I was born in New York.
Yeah, I read that you grew up in New York and you studied there, and must be quite different, I believe.
It's radically different. The topography,
Radically.
the geography, the climate. Also, New York, like Buenos Aires, is a very dense and intense urban concentration. And here in the mountains in Colorado, there's a greater feeling of space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I can so tell that. Because actually here in Buenos Aires, as you said, it's a big density of people and buildings. It's not like New York, I mean, that big, but yet, I mean, it's really intense. As soon as you get out just a bit here in the province into it's a lovely place actually. So tell me, David, if you don't mind, we'll start the interview. You told me in the first email I sent you that your father lived here in Buenos Aires
Yes, for 2 years,
for 2 years.
from
How,
19, from 1912 to 1914, he was shining shoes.
of course.
That's how he supported himself. Bedros Barsamian.
Bedros Barsamian, okay.
He was born in a village called Nibishi near Kharpet in historical Western
Harpet?
Armenia.
Of course,
Yeah,
yes. I don't know the village, but I know Harpet.
yes. And it's interesting. My father came to New York in 1912, and the person from his village who was already in the United States was supposed to come to the port, to the ship, to guarantee him because he was so young. That person didn't come to the ship. My father could not get off, and the next stop was Buenos Aires. So he went to Argentina, and then 2 years later, he was able to get into the United States.
Unbelievable. That's a lovely story, actually. I'm so glad you told me that because actually that was even before the genocide, as we said.
Well, not yeah. It was before the genocide, but remember, and your readers should know, from 1894 to
Exactly.
1896, there was a huge massacre.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Several hundred thousand Armenians were killed, including my grandfather. That is to say, Barsamian, Bedros's father, was disappeared in that period of 1890. So Bedros was born in 1895. He never knew his father, my grandfather.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So your granddad was already a victim of the
Yes,
early genocide, let's call it.
yes.
Baron Barsamian?
Barsamian.
Wow, wow. And he just disappeared, as you said. I mean, you never found him. You don't know if he was killed, if he was taken as a slave somewhere.
We
Don't.
presumed that he was disappeared and killed. You know, like you had your desaparecidos in
Yeah,
Argentina,
yeah.
also there in Turkey.
Well, here's a topic then to talk about because actually here we Armenians in Argentina, we talk a lot about, we make a lot of, we analyze a lot what happened here during the regime, because somehow, of course, it's not the same because it's something completely different. But then there are no bodies. We have no corpses. We have no dead people, as they call them here, desaparecidos, that disappeared. And we, during the genocide, we lost our people. We lost our families. My 4 grandparents survived. That's why I'm here. And my dad was born here in Argentina, and my mom was born in Greece. This is quite usual, you know that. And so that's why we're so connected with human rights and things here. We Armenian people, we are very active in human rights with the Argentinian side because of this similarity. And I haven't lived it, the dictatorship, because I was little, but of course I know what happened, and we're still fighting it, and we're still things. So you, as a journalist, as an investigator, as an intellectual of your kind, what would you say is your relationship nowadays, for instance? We'll start with the Armenian side, then we'll go through some other topics. With the Armenian community, for instance, is there an Armenian community in Colorado?
Very small. It's an active group. Maybe it's a couple of hundred people. Some of them are actually from the old Soviet Union, from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, places like that have come here, that they don't speak Armenian, they speak Russian.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
But there's also a group from Lebanon.
Of course.
That I relate to them.
And do you actively participate in, I don't know, meetings or whatever?
Yes, there was for example, during the Nagorno-Karabakh war, we had multiple demonstrations. Large numbers of people came out to protest what Azerbaijan and Turkey were doing to Artsakh, to Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you said Artsakh
and they have, occasionally what we call hantes, which is like a dinner or a lunch, a picnic, get-togethers. That particularly in the summertime when the climate is warm, we have those as well. So it's a small but active community.
Must be bigger in New York, I believe, or bigger in LA for sure.
Yes, Glendale, North Hollywood, Pasadena, huge numbers of Armenians. You can walk down the street in Glendale and not hear English. Armenian is spoken widely. There are many shops, many stores, wonderful bakeries and restaurants. We like to eat. We're also like Latin.
That's
We enjoy
what we do.
good food. We enjoy good food. We enjoy good conversation. We enjoy good music. So while I love our traditional music, I also love Mercedes Sosa. I adore her. I listen to her all the time. I love her music. Gracias a la vida. Gracias a la vida.
Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto, which gave me so much.
Yes.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice. And so kind of you to tell us this, because it's very important to us that our culture, it's reflected somewhere else.
Absolutely. And one of my treasured recordings is Mercedes in the Teatro Opera in Buenos Aires. Right after the generals were thrown out, she gave her first public concert, and that's a beautiful recording. I listen to it frequently.
That's a beautiful thing you're telling us. Do you know who played in the same theater, in el Teatro Ópera? Ara Malikian played there.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I went to see him a couple of years ago. What a marvelous story. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. She's huge here, you can tell.
Yes.
She's very important, again, with human rights and things. During the dictatorship, she had a real hard time. And so that's why I mean, and because of what she sang, actually. Her songs are really, they tell a lot about us as Argentine, I mean. And what else do you know then about Argentina? Tell me that, David.
Well, I know Mercedes is from Tucumán.
Muy bien,
Yes.
of
And
course.
there's this beautiful area, Patagonia,
Beautiful. Yeah,
that I would love to visit if I ever have the opportunity.
please.
I would like to visit.
You should come. You should come because, first, because of your dad. I mean, you're telling this amazing story about your father, which isn't actually very different from my grandfather on my father's side, who first went to New York, and then they had a misunderstanding among the ships, so he ended up here, something like that. So it's on the Toutonian side, that amazing story. And he spent 2 years working at Ford fabric there in New York, but then he came here. And I'm afraid, I would say, nowadays. But then again, so you should come, as I said, because of your father, because of that story, so you can visit Buenos Aires. It's a beautiful city. And Patagonia, believe me, I haven't been to the States, I'm afraid, but I lived in Europe quite a long time. And of course, I love Europe everywhere. It's beautiful. But Patagonia is something unbelievable. I mean, you're amazed. Ushuaia, Tierra del Fuego, if you go down there. I mean, it's a beautiful, I love the cold weather, I got to admit, so that's something else. And
And what about El Gaucho Martin Fierro,
what about him? What about him?
the epic poem?
That it's not just an epic poem, actually. It's the first kick of our literature. You should know that, you must know that Jorge Luis Borges, is our biggest, and no one will ever be as big as he was. But he was actually he studied El Martín Fierro a lot, because it tells a lot. Martín Fierro was a character that Jose Hernandez made up, and he was a symbolism of what was the Pampas those very years, which was the Spanish conquerors fighting and killing, because this was the whole Patagonia was a huge first genocide ever. They killed them all. I mean, if you go Patagonia, you can't believe it. It's like us. I mean, if you see Argentinian people around the world, you can't tell where we're from. When I lived in Europe, everyone asked me if I was from Eastern Europe or if I was from Russia, because I'm so Caucasian. It's so obvious. I mean, but then again, if you come here, you can see that. And El Martín Fierro gives us this sense of maybe belonging, some cultural connection with something we couldn't be able to do it. I mean, because they killed them all. And if you go to the countryside, maybe you see a gaucho, because it's like that. there are some gauchos, or maybe people dressed as gauchos for the tourist people. But the poem is amazing. I mean, the poem, it tells a lot about those hard times and the fights and these things. Well, it's amazing that you know about Martin Ferrer. I'm so happy you asked me about this. Thank you.
Well, I'm very interested in other cultures, and I think being Armenian is a bridge to opening up the universe and to see the diversity in cultures, in languages, in poetry, in music, but how essentially humankind is one entity. And because of politics, because of, may I say, capitalism, we are divided, we are, cut off from a lot of the important cultural movements and political movements around the world. And so I feel as an Armenian American, I have almost an obligation to reach out. And so one of the things I began in Boulder when I moved here in 1978 was a cultural program on the community radio station. It was called Ganges to the Nile. That's why I know about Mercedes Sosa. That's why I know about Eduardo Galeano of
All right.
Daniel Viglietti, and who wrote Gracias a la Vida, the wonderful composer from Chile.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So all of those things I try to bring into the program, Middle Eastern, India, I played Indian music, I studied in India. So I brought all of these different cultures together.
I never thought about it. I mean, because I'm into languages a lot. I love different cultures. I try to read and study about the whole thing, but I never thought of it as an Armenian. And you're right, it's because they try to take away our identity, so we embrace maybe the whole world, trying to understand. I mean, I believe because of your work that you're like a very, I won't say optimistic, but like you have this really nice view of everything. I'm afraid I'm a bit more pessimistic sometimes. So that's why I read Chomsky a lot, actually.
Well, Antonio Gramsci was a great Italian Marxist scholar who died in Mussolini's prison.
In jail, yeah.
He said that he had pessimism of the intellect, so that when he saw the reality, he was not sugarcoating it, saying it's wonderful, it's
No, of
utopia.
course, of course.
Pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will, that you can overcome these difficulties. And this was an inspiration for Chomsky, for Edward Said also. They often quote and do quote Gramsci.
Yeah, I've studied a lot Gramsci, of course. I really enjoy his essays, and he fought the fascism, and as the Clash, the band, the English band would say, we fought the law and the law won, but well, here we are.
But you see, he was an engaged intellectual. He was connected to organic movements, and that's what he talked about. The role of the intellectual, something that Chomsky has continued. It cannot just be abstract scholarship on obscure things. It has to connect with people to where they are today, and putting that knowledge in use for organizations, for community groups to use that knowledge.
I got to be honest, I would like to ask you a lot of things because this is my one opportunity. But let's say,
We can do it again.
Okay, well, that would be really nice, really, really nice. So let's say, because I believe your work, it's up to independent journalism, which I believe is the same what I do, hopefully. And so I would like to know your opinion about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and the whole thing. What do you think about that? Or this post-truth, as we call them nowadays, with the lies in media?
Well, the lies have always been there. Government officials in all countries, the United States, Argentina, Bangladesh, governments are always trying to manufacture consent for their policies. And in doing that, they occasionally twist the truth or invent entirely new scenarios. And we just saw in 4 years of the administration of Donald Trump that lying has been elevated to almost an art form, a constant fabrications and mendacities and misrepresentations. And
A masterpiece.
I mean, just even by US standards, this was quite an extraordinary period where you had a pathological liar occupying the White House. And you know, that is, now you ask about Assange. I admire what he did. Now, some people may have problems with his personality. They say, you know, he's arrogant or he's this or that. I'm not interested in those things. He did a great public service by releasing those documents, and particularly I'm thinking of one video which shows American helicopters shooting Iraqi civilians
I so remember that. I so remember that.
And laughing about it, not feeling any shame or disgust or horror.
Empathy.
None whatsoever. Wow, look at those, look at them, shoot them up, you know, light them up. That's what they said, light them up, like they're, you know, like it was a bonfire. So releasing those documents was an important act of journalistic freedom and integrity. And WikiLeaks did much to expose the crimes of the US government, of which there are many to be exposed, the invasion of Iraq and the invasion of Afghanistan also are two of the major war crimes of the post-war era, two of the major war crimes of this period since 1945, when essentially the US replaces Britain as the global hegemon.
Absolutely, absolutely. I so agree with everything you just said, not just about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, but about post-Cold War. These are the worst things that happen. And the other day, I believe this was just this week or maybe last week, I saw this video where Julian Assange, 5 years ago, he said exactly what was going on these days in Afghanistan. He said, this is what will happen. America and UK, well, not UK, England actually, will do this. And what's going on? The whole thing. And what do you think about, because there's something else which happened, because during the Artsakh war, all I could think about, well, not just that, but among a lot of things that I thought about it, it was that happened during the pandemic area, and the world wasn't doing a thing about it. And now Afghanistan, and the world is more aware of that. I can understand that. I won't say it's all right, but I understand it. I mean, and then again, it's with the COVID and the pandemic going on. So who will survive
Who will survive?
in mankind?
Humanity, I don't want to be dramatic here, but humanity is at a crossroads, facing enormous dangers to the very existence of life on Earth as we know it. Climate chaos, climate catastrophe is accelerating at a rate even beyond what had been predicted by our best scientists.
Yeah.
The recent IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, points to a very bleak and dire future for humankind unless we can arrest and reverse the increase in temperature of the Earth's temperature. So we're in a very serious situation. This was recognized by the UN Secretary General Gutierrez, who said this report is code red for humankind. Code red being the most extreme danger. This is it. We're either going to survive as a species, or we are going to see great numbers of people simply die. There will be already, there is the beginning of climate chaos resulting in climate refugees. Why are so many people, and it's not just war, why are so many people leaving their countries and trying to get to other countries? It's because they are climate refugees. There is drought. They cannot grow their crops. There's hunger. When people are hungry, they march, they walk, they try to get to a place where they can find food and sustenance. So we're in an extremely dangerous period, and it doesn't seem that basically the capitalist system is responding with the urgency required. Now, there are some, I would say, cosmetic things that are being done in the United States about climate chaos. For example, recycling paper and plastics and cardboard, driving hybrid cars, that are half electric.
Yeah.
But this is not enough. We require, the patient is in the emergency room at the hospital and needs immediate attention. And just applying, lipstick or eye makeup or eyeshadow or changing the color of your hair, this is not going to resolve the crisis that humankind is facing.
No, I'm afraid it's exactly as you said, because this cosmetic thing, as you described it, with recycling, which is great, I saw recycle, but then you're fracking every time. I mean, the fracking is going on, no one's stopping it. And so, okay, we recycle at home, each individual, we as a person, but I mean, that's not much. And there's something that I think, which is, okay, nowadays there's a pandemic, there's 2 wars going on. Artsakh is going on because it's not over yet. Afghanistan is going on, it's not a war, but they're in this dangerous place. The climate change. There are a lot of, I won't say little, but there are a lot of things going on, which is not like the First World War or the second one or the Dark Ages or like something really dramatic and terrible for the whole world. But there are little things that is consuming us. So, okay, I am being dramatic. And my mom, she's Greek, as I said, everything is a big tragedy, of course. So I believe that, okay, there's not a big thing, and then there's a pandemic, of course, but we're not doing it well, and everything is accelerating every time, more and more, and instead of, I mean, because of the climate change, for instance, I don't see a solution. I don't see it at all. I mean, what happened? I know that I'm 50 years old. I know that new generations, I see my little niece, what she understands, how she sees the future. She'll go study architecture in Japan, she believes, which is great. And if you ask me, there's no future. I mean, then again, the Clash, about these are the Sex Pistols, actually. But I mean, the world as we know is collapsing. And the root of it all is capitalism, I believe. I mean, it started with that. I mean, we work all day, non-stop, gaining money. We buy dollars, you know how it is in Argentina, because that's the only money we can trust as you. So, and what for? I mean, what is it? I mean,
Well, you see, the capitalist system is constantly accumulating, and it's
exactly.
accumulating wealth, and it is driven by the desire for profits to make more and more money. And so nature, this beautiful gift that we have here on this earth, is being plundered, it's being looted, it's being attacked, we are actually raping our mother. If we see nature as the feminine, and it is feminine because it gives life, then we are attacking our own mother. This is a form of matricide, genocide, matricide, of looting the earth, what Carl Sagan, the great scientist, called this pale blue dot in the universe. This is such an unusual place that we are in. And to allow capitalism to exploit and destroy the earth is unimaginable. It's such a crime that a few people will enrich themselves and pauperize the great mass of humanity. And I just want to go back just for a second on Julian Assange and say something. He is being politically persecuted for speaking out as a journalist. He is a journalist. He has a right to report on news and information and to circulate information that may embarrass governments. And this persecution started not under Trump, but under Barack Obama, who was seen as a great liberal, open-minded, very progressive type of president. It began under him. It was Edward Snowden also who was persecuted under Obama, and that continues today. He is living in exile in Russia because he cannot come to the United States.
I know.
So I just wanted to mention those things.
Good. And tell us, please, what's your situation? You can't go to India. Is it like that nowadays?
Yes, 10 years
Still.
ago, September 23rd, 2011, I arrived at the airport in New Delhi, as I had for many, many years, many times.
All right.
I had a valid visa in my passport, and I was stopped and interrogated and forced back on the same Lufthansa flight that I arrived on with no explanation. Until this day, I have not received any response from many emails, telephone calls, letters that I and my friends in India have delivered to the Prime Minister, to the President of India, to the Minister of Interior, etc. No explanation.
So
I think it's
no formal thing about it. I mean, no one said a thing in a formal way, in a diplomatic way.
not at all. And I mean, there were hints that it's because I have very outspoken opinions about Kashmir. India is occupying Kashmir against the will of the majority of the Kashmiri people. There's a lot of history in to this, and we don't have time to go into.
But but we know that, yeah.
In 1947, when the British left India, they created a disaster in the partition, which resulted in over 1 million deaths. It still is a major issue between Pakistan and India and Kashmir. And Kashmir was kind of caught, was a sandwich. It was caught in the middle between Pakistan and India. So that's probably why the Indian government doesn't want me to visit India.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Best
actually,
example, I want to explain the best example of that, why Hindu nationalists feel so strongly about Kashmir. It's very similar to how certain Jews feel about Israel. It's almost, it's an irrational passion. And you admire people for being passionate,
of
but
course.
it's not based in any rationality. And so as soon as the Hindu nationalist hears criticism about Kashmir, they go berserk. They go ballistic.
Well, but that's what happens with nationalism around the world. I mean, it becomes
Exactly.
around. It happens everywhere. You were saying about this separation of the lands. I just read this interview that you did with Noam Chomsky, and you're talking about Artsakh, about Nagorno-Karabakh, and he says something that I have no idea, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry. I mean, I'm so embarrassed. But you're telling him about the situation years ago with Azerbaijan and what was going on, and he says, "Yeah," and you tell him, "Yeah, because Stalin gave it as a gift, no, Nakhichevan and Artsakh to Azerbaijan," and he says something, "Yes, but the British and I'm not sure if and the French uh, had to do with this. They were in the middle of this." I mean, he was like, they were, I mean, this southern Caucasus place, and regarding the borders, the French and the British, as imperialists, they draw lines where they wanted, actually. I mean, they draw maps. That's what he says about it. And do you think, which is his thinking nowadays about the war? Have you talked to him about this? Because I tried to reach him and he kindly answered, but well, he said till January we won't be able to talk. But what he thinks about what happened this last month in Artsakh, and what's your opinion, please?
Well, obviously, any discussion has to bring in the whole issue of imperialism and
Always.
of big powers manipulating and dominating and controlling smaller powers. And Armenia is in a very vulnerable position. It's landlocked. It has no access to the sea. It's surrounded on two sides by enemies, Turkey and Azerbaijan. There's a small border with Iran and a little bit longer border with Georgia. I've been to Tbilisi. I've been to
Yeah, which means nothing, actually.
and so I think Armenia should have when it won the war in the early 90s, it should have taken on a more how shall I say this without offending people, a more generous policy towards the Azeris. I know that's hard to think of because so many Armenians in Azerbaijan, in the Sumgait and in Baku, they were massacred. So there's this unfortunate feeling of revenge, of responding to atrocities by one side to the other. Once that starts, there's no end to it. And where do you break this chain of events of action, reaction, and how do you do that? There could have been, I think, the possibility of a settlement between the two countries. And very clearly, Nagorno-Karabakh is an Armenian majority population. There's no disputing that. It's an absolute fact. Many attempts during the entire Soviet period to address this issue were denied by Moscow. They refused to look at this issue, which for Armenians was very strong, but not only for Armenians. There were other nationalities that had territorial issues within the Soviet empire.
Yeah.
Everything was put under the table. Everything was shoved to one side. And so there was never any adjudication, any just solutions. They were not sought for, they were not found. And that has led to more conflict, as we see in the Ukraine, in Donbass, in Crimea, in Belarus,
Exactly.
and in other parts of the former Soviet empire. So Stalin has a lot to answer for. Our dear friend, Comrade Stalin, Tovarish from Georgia, as minister of the minorities, he wanted to curry favor with Ankara. Why? Because he saw Ataturk and the Turkish Republic as a bulwark against imperialism. He completely misunderstood the historical facts of what Turkey represented in 1921, 22, 23. But that was part of the reason. Turkey was supplying guns and weapons to the Azeris during the September war, as well as and intelligence. So it's a very difficult situation for Armenia.
The mercenaries paying money, I mean.
Bringing jihadis from Syria and paying them, to kill Armenians. I mean, this is criminal. It's scandalous. But that's what powers do when they're able to exert force over weaker opponents. That's what happens. A huge injustice happens, and this, unfortunately, for the Armenian people, we have been wedded to injustice for centuries, and in one way that has strengthened us. It has given us a certain resilience, but in another way, it has caused enormous damage to our people who remain in the Caucasus, but also around the world. You're sitting in Buenos Aires, I'm sitting in Boulder, Colorado. We are here because of consequences of actions that happened elsewhere a long time ago.
Yeah, but there's this needless cost of lives, which could be, I mean, there's people dying, and there's no need of that. And yes, we Armenians around the world, diaspora, we are stronger, and yes, with this resilience, as you say, and we're strong, and people respect us a lot because of our work and whatever it is that we're doing. But in Armenia, and there's one other thing I would like to add about Artsakh, which is, okay, they're Armenians, they consider themselves Armenians, but they consider themselves independent as well, I mean, from Armenia. So that's some other topic. That's some other thing, which is, I mean, I know I don't want to, and that I don't want that anyone gets angry because of this, but I believe there's this thing that maybe we are not looking at. And yes, we are helping from around the world. We Armenians around the world, we are helping, we're sending everything we can to help them, or maybe even receiving them, because here in Argentina, for instance, these last years, a lot of Ayastansi came here. It's amazing. I mean, you couldn't believe it. They speak so differently, you know, and they look even so different. And but they're among us. I mean, they come to church, and it's some other thing. But I'm afraid Azerbaijan, with the help of Turkey, I mean, they're collapsing our territory, our Armenian territory, because of through Nakhichevan, they're going to the other side. And again, this needless cost of lives, because we're losing so many young kids. I mean, I believe I read this about yourself, that you said that you've been to Armenia and you noticed that there weren't like young guys. Is that so? I mean, I haven't been to Armenia, I'm afraid, yet. So,
Well, yes, what I said was when I visited villages,
okay,
I
villages.
noticed that there were a lot of old people and a lot of very young people, but nothing in between. And so I asked in these villages, you know, where are the 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old people? He said, there's no work here. They've all gone to Russia.
To Russia. Of course, yeah, I know that, yeah.
You know, and also the former Soviet republics like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, etc. They're going there to find work, and so they become like economic mercenaries. They send the money home to support their families, but they spend most of their time there outside the country. So that was very interesting to see that in the villages, that there was not a lot of young people, middle-aged people.
Right.
They have, because of economic
Yeah, of
reasons.
course. Yeah. I mean, it happens around the world. So, yeah, of course. In a little place like Armenia.
Without a lot of resources, with Turkey blockading the western border, that has a huge economic impact
Right.
on Armenia. Negative impact, obviously.
Right, yeah. I won't take you long, but I wanted to tell you that I just interviewed Mr. Franco Berardi, the Italian philosopher, and he told me that he was shocked. We were talking about the Chilean constitution, the new Chilean constitution. And he told me that he got shocked because he saw a writing on a wall in Chile where it says it wasn't depression, it was capitalism. And he said, yeah, that's an amazing line. And that he thought a lot about it, and he analyzes a lot during the interview. We talked a lot about it. And in the end, he said something like, I believe, I mean, he's a very sensitive man, let's say, a Gramsci man, a new Gramsci was sort of man. And he said, I believe the way to go through this is revolution, but not revolution in a sense of cutting heads, Maria Antonietta, or but taking the streets. I mean, we people, as the Chilean did, as the Chilean people did, and the Armenian people did actually, right? So the revolution, this is the only way to get through this depression. I mean, the only way we can fight it, it's because I told him, not because we're Argentines and we Argentinians are into psychoanalysis a lot, so blah, blah. And he said, yeah, I know you well. He comes every year here. And he said, but no, you have to take the streets. That's the only way, which I so believe that, right? But well, we Armenians, we're around the world, and we're not, I mean, you're there, I'm here, they're miles and miles away, so there are no streets to take, I'm afraid. But I wouldn't like to end this interview with a dramatic and negative way of mine, and I'm dressed in black. So I would like you to say, thank you very much. It's an honor. It's a really, really a great honor. And we'll be in touch, as you said. And
Sure. Let's do
anything, sorry.
Let's do interview anytime. You just let me know. I'm happy to talk to you. By the way, I couldn't remember the name of the composer that I was thinking of. Violeta Parra.
Violeta Parra, muy bien, muy bien.
She wrote Gracias a la Vida
Of
and many other
course.
songs. But you know, she reminded me a little bit of Gomidas Vartabed, the great Armenian.
How so?
I'll tell you why. She went into the villages and collected these old songs and wrote them down. Gomidas did the same thing. He went into Anatolia, to the villages. People were illiterate, but they had rich music, and he wrote that music down. In some ways, she reminds me of Gomidas.
What a beautiful analogy. What a, it gave me the goosebumps, as you say. Wow, what a beautiful analogy. And actually, Violeta Parra, she's a great poet as well. And there are like many new editions. So next time we'll talk and you'll come visit us, and I'll try to get, I don't know, like English versions of the Violeta Parra's poems. There are bilingual editions, I know them well, the Chilean actually editions. So that will be one of my gifts for you. Baron Barsamian.
Avita, Anuna Stavita. Call me David.
Okay, then.
No formality. One good thing about the United States is that we don't have a lot of formalities, you know, professor, doctor, you know, in other countries that's important, but here people are a little more informal. So
yeah,
please call me David.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Yeah, I believe I knew that, but I lived in England, so I know that it's so formal, everything there. So
Very, yes.
Yeah, very much so. And that's how I learned, I'm afraid. But well, David, then again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for doing this for Diario Armenia. We are very, very pleased to have you as our first guest. And thank you very much for your work. We'll continue reading you, listening to you, and everything. So promise us, Armenians in Argentina, that you come visit us.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.